This is an overview of Futato chapter 26. I'm going to go through this a little quickly, even though the material in this chapter is going to take some thought. I have a separate video that summarizes what Futato is referring to as the Vav relative, so I won't take a whole lot of time in this overview. I'll save some of what I want to say for the summary, the grammar video. Now, what he's talking about in this chapter is a very specific use and function of the Vav conjunction. Now, we've had the Vav conjunction. It's just simply the letter Vav with a Shava underneath it. But there are times when that Vav conjunction is going to change in terms of its pointing, in terms of the vowel associated with it. And when you see that happen, that's going to signal a very specific function for that conjunction that's going to dictate the verbal form that it's attached to in terms of how you would translate it and how you would understand it. Now that would be easy because all you need to do is look at the change in form. The difficulty in this chapter is going to be when the Vav as we know it to this point, the Vav with the two dots, the Shava underneath it, when that also signals a specific function, because that's going to be identical to the normal conjunction. Up until this time, you have a Vav conjunction. It's this and that, this action and that action, or this thing and that thing. You just translate it and, or maybe but, or something like that, depending on the context. This chapter is going to be talking about the Vav conjunction specifically and only with respect to this chapter attached to verb forms. Okay, so that's the first thing to tuck in under your belt. This chapter is about the Vav with verb forms, but let's just jump in. Again, he mentions that this is a special use of the conjunction form of the Vav relative imperfect. Now there's going to be a Vav relative imperfect and a Vav relative perfect. Okay, so there's two types of this. The imperfect is the one that will change the pointing. Now notice here we have Vav relative imperfect is made up of Vav plus Patach plus a strong Dagesh in the following consonant, the first consonant of the verb form. And all of that gets prefixed to an imperfect or adjussive form. So notice we have here Vayiktol. So Yiktol would be our familiar Cal imperfect third masculine singular. The Vav is prefixed to this verb form, to the imperfect form, and when it is, it's changed. The pointing is changed. We have a patach here, and then a dagesh goes inside the yod to sort of attach the Vav to the verb form. The dagesh goes inside the first consonant of the verb form, and that's the pattern. Vayiktol. Instead of just yiktol, it's vayiktol. And we don't have ve-yiktol, like the normal Vav conjunction with the Shava. We have vayiktol, vaitiktol, vaektol. Now notice here, it's not a patach under the Vav, and that's because gutturals, okay, here's the aleph, do not take the dagesh. Remember this? And so you have a compensatory lengthening of the patach to a comets to accommodate the guttural. But again, if you look at the Vav here, it's Vav not with the two dots, not with the Shava. It's something different. So when it's something different attached to an imperfect verb form, that's your signal, that's your tell for, okay, we have a Vav relative construction here. Now, he notes here the verb form is usually actually the adjussive and not the imperfect, as is clear from Vav relative imperfect of some forms of third hay. You know, this is all well and good, but I want you to notice something. I'm going to summarize the point here, and you won't have to, worry about is it adjussive or is it an imperfect form. Okay, look at the imperfects here. Third hay, yivna, yivka. Then we have a hollow, yakum, yasim. Okay, these are hollows. These are our third hey examples. The jussive, of course, abbreviates the vowel. We have yiben, that's an abbreviated form. We don't have the segol hey at the back. Yevk, yakom, yasem. Okay. Wonderful. Well and good. Imperfect adjussive. We know that the adjussive is an abbreviated form of the imperfect. We already know that. Now look here. It doesn't really matter whether it's the adjussive form or the imperfect form, because look, the pattern's the same. Vai, yiben. Vai, we have the patak with the dagesh. Patak, dagesh. Patak, dagesh. Patak, dagesh. That's all you need to know. Whenever you see that with a vav, appended to, prefixed to either a full imperfect form or adjussive form, you know either one of them is a vav relative. And you're going to translate that vav relative not the way we've been typically translating imperfects, as incomplete action, action not yet realized. So yiktol would be he will kill. Okay, we're going to lose the will translation. That's the significance of the vav relative. Imperfects, again, would be he will kill. Yiktol is he will kill. Vayiktol would be he killed. You translate it sort of as a past narrative act. The vav relative is the form, is the construction of vav plus an imperfect form that is used basically on every page of the Hebrew Bible that's narrative. It is the narrative technique. It is the stylistic narrative way of constructing a narrative. So like you get Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, things like this. There's vayiktols just everywhere because it's a narration of events. And so again, that's the significance of it in terms of translation. Now he talks about the accent moving. Who cares? Okay, all you need to know is the vav changes its pointing. It's vav, patak, dagesh in the first consonant. And again, you don't have the dagesh if you have a guttural. Then it would be vav comets. You see that you're going to have a vav relative form. That vav attached to an imperfect or adjussive form is the vav relative. And we also have a vav relative perfect. This is the simple vav, the normal one, vav with shva, and it gets attached to a perfect verb form. So down here we have ve katalta, ve katalti. Now, in this case, it might be worth noting that the accent will occur on the last syllable. But to be honest with you, I don't think you even really need to know that, because as I will point out in the grammar video, you will only, when you see a vav with a perfect, okay, it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be simply continuing the thought of a previous, catch this, a previous perfect verb form. He did this and he did that. Simple conjunction. When the preceding verb, the immediately preceding verb, is an imperfect verb form, and then you get the vav plus a perfect, then that is a vav relative perfect. And you would translate that, relating it to, this is why it's called vav relative, relating it to the preceding verb form, the imperfect yiktol, he will kill. So if I had yiktol, he will kill, and then I have ve katalta, up until this point, you would translate he will kill and you killed, because it's a perfect form with a vav. But now we're learning that certain verbs in sequence, okay, that matters. If I had yiktol and then ve katalta, I would have he will kill and you will kill. It's a vav relative perfect that takes on the translation feel, the translation aspect of the immediately preceding imperfect form. Now if we had a perfect form before this, you translate them both as perfects. This would be a normal Vav conjunction. Perfect, Vav, perfect. Okay, he killed and you killed. Okay, but if the preceding verb is an imperfect and you see a Vav with a perfect, in narrative you need to translate that second form, that Vav perfect, as though it were an imperfect. Okay, so this is why it's tricky. Again, you can read through the rest of this, but I will summarize this again in the grammar video. I do recommend that you read through what Futato has here. He's going to be explaining this. One thing you want to note right away is what Futato calls the Vav relative. Almost every other grammar calls a Vav consecutive, because it's a consecutive sequence that's the issue. Some sort of highbrow Hebrew grammars, reference grammars, won't call it either. They will spell it out in transliteration. They'll call it the vayiktol, after the paradigmatic verb form using katal. So vayiktol is the same as Vav consecutive, is the same as Vav relative. You will see these terms in different grammars, but we're going to try to stick with Futato's term here, so I'm going to try not to confuse you. But if I slip and I say Vav consecutive, it's the same thing as a Vav relative. So read through this, what he has here. That's the whole chapter. You get to vocabulary here. But definitely watch the grammar video, because I'm going to try to condense his material here into what I hope will be sort of an easier way to get this in your head, because you're going to see Vav relatives everywhere. So the key here is to now start to pay attention to sequences of verbs. Okay, we have we have a verb form, and then we need to take note of what form, is it a perfect or an imperfect, and then what follows. The easy ones are going to be when you have the Vav relative on an imperfect, because the pointing, the vowels, will change. Okay, so here I'm telling you, now it's time to pay attention to this particular vowel pattern. That will be the easy tell, because it won't be your normal Vav. The harder one will be when you have a normal Vav attached to a perfect. Then you're going to have to look at the verb that came before, and if it's an imperfect, then you know you have a Vav relative perfect on your hands. So that's the end of the overview for chapter 26, and please watch the grammar video associated with this.